Forgiving Dad. For a long time, I hated my dad and didn't forgive him. I hated him for his drinking, his rages, his vulgarity, for walking around the house in his underwear, for peeing in the bathroom sink, for scaring me. When I was 13, I wished he would die. And then he did. I thought I had killed him. For 15 years, I never mentioned his name to anyone. Applying kids' magical thinking, I was scared to death I might kill someone else with mere thoughts. For the longest time, I couldn't forgive myself. I was scared to death that I would damage someone else. But I'm healing. And as I write this chapter and explore the idea of forgiveness, I think of Dad. His father dying at about the time that boys are first forbidden to feel their emotions, at age 5. Publicly humiliated by his preacher grandfather in front of the congregation at 14. Then running away from home and living on his own, adventuring to Alaska, becoming a bush pilot. Later a glad-handing California salesman, a Willie Loman, a man's man, a man finally undone by unemployment, drinking, and failure. Dad never took the first step towards forgiveness. He never got in touch with his own pain, never knew how to process his own tender feelings. Instead, he took the anger path and forced those unwanted feelings onto us. He blamed himself for feeling forbidden pain, then quickly shifted that blame onto us. He took us all to live in the country of resentment. Eventually he drank and blamed the forbidden feelings away, and he killed himself in the process. But he wasn't always like that. A memory returns. It was evening at the river. I was 5 and Dad was still young and strong. We were camping in the California Coast Range. Although I couldn't swim, I had wandered down to the river after dinner and paddled an inner tube out to the middle of the big dark pool. I lay back in the inner tube, gazing at the cliff that loomed above on the other side of the water. Suddenly I slipped through the middle of the tube, and I was in the water, struggling. I sank into the cold, dark water. As I struggled to the surface, I could see my dad running down the beach, tearing off his shoes and plunging powerfully into the river. Then I was under again, swallowing cold water, sinking into blackness. In a moment I was pushed powerfully to the surface. He'd come up below me, pushing me to the air. As I gasped for air, he rose like a sea lion to the surface below me, and I was saved. But then he swallowed water and began to cough and struggle himself. "Dad!" I cried in a panic. He sank below me, and I again fell back into the dark waters, gulping and sputtering, stepping on his head. As we sank, the murky yellow light of the world receded into darkness, with no sound but my thundering heartbeats. I felt his hands grip my calves and place my feet firmly on his shoulders. Then, as in the game we'd often played, he drifted down and bounced back up from the river bottom, thrusting me to the surface. And then his tattooed arm was around my chest, towing me to safety, keeping my face above the water. He coughed and murmured, "It's okay, Cal. It's okay." Finally, we staggered onto the little sandy beach, and Dad hugged me. As I stood gasping, shivering, and crying, he hugged me to his heaving chest. Then he went over and got a towel out of the trailer and wrapped it around me. Later, as he heated hot chocolate on the Coleman stove, he did the unusual. He sat me on his lap. After a while, he turned the Giants game on the radio, and we sipped hot chocolate while the sun sank behind the cliff. By the end, I think Dad, like me, had totally forgotten that day. He forgot his goodness. I wish that when he ruminated on his failures, he had been able to remember the good things. I wish that when he thought of his years of unemployment, his bankruptcy, the jalopies he drove, his failed marriages, his destructive anger, he'd been able to recall that day on the river. Most of all, I wish he'd had a kind father to remind him of the good things about himself. His sense of humor, his charm, his ability to spin a story for a crowd, his compassion for the unfortunate, his intelligence, his ability to make a day's outing with a young boy into an exciting adventure. I wish he had understood that he was no different than any of us, a mixture of good and bad. I wish someone had told him that he didn't have to be a superhero. He was simply human. I wish he'd realized he could be forgiven, and that he could forgive. The fact was, he didn't have to die alone in the country of resentments. There was room for him in the country of love.